Is it important to arrange a snake enclosure in a particular way? What are the priorities to consider when creating habitats for our slithery friends? Does the way it looks really matter? Keep watching for the answers to those questions and more as we examine 4 golden rules of enclosure composition and how utilizing them can positively affect the behaviors and health of your snake and your relationship with it. I'll also critique some of my own enclosures based on those rules to explore how and why they might be improved. For those of you who are listening as opposed to watching, this will be a very visual episode, so by all means keep listening, but you may want to come back to it again later when you have time to sit down and use your eyeballs. So let's slither on into it. The standard guidelines for setting up a snake enclosure are usually oversimplified to suit what's easiest for the keeper. But with hundreds, if not thousands, of species of snakes in the reptile keeping hobby, originating from vastly different types of habitats, how does that simplification benefit the snakes living in captivity? Each species has evolved and adapted to specific climates and landscapes. So to help them truly thrive in our care, the first step to welfare-based enclosure design is researching a species' ecology and behaviors so we can try to offer them similar opportunities in captivity. And when I say research, I don't mean Google the captive keeping guidelines for your snake. Instead, try searching for information that's been scientifically documented from observations in the wild. Google searches are easy, but they prioritize commercial sites trying to sell you stuff, or sites with anecdotal or outdated information. In other words, the first several pages of your Google search is going to be mostly crap. Use targeted keywords to find more specific results. For example, use a snake's scientific name instead of its common name. Or instead of Google search, try Google Scholar for peer-reviewed articles. Or have fun on iNaturalist, where you can search for photographic observations with locations on a world map. It allows you to see examples of how the snake is utilizing its habitat in situ. And from there, you can research the native landscape features and climate data to better inform your enclosure design and make the animal feel more at home. As we discuss the most important priorities for composition, I'll be referencing my own enclosures as examples, but I want to make it crystal clear that by no means do I think my enclosures are perfect or even close to the best examples. I still have a lot of research and improvements to do myself, and I consider all of them to be a perpetual work in progress. Part of the joy of caring for snakes is continuously improving and enriching their lives as we have the means and opportunity to do so. So just keep that in mind as I share what I've done so far. Likewise, this video is not intended to shame you for not having things perfect already, but to help you identify how you might progress and set goals that keep the animal's benefit in mind. Sharing my own work is honestly a way to help myself reflect and advance as much as it is for you. To give credit where it's due, the concepts we review today come from a webinar I took from the amazing guys over at Project Herpetoculture. If you don't know of them already, please do support their channel on YouTube or Spotify. They taught me about the 4 golden rules of enclosure composition, which are: number 1, provide security. Number 2, maximize usable space. Number 3, encourage a broad range of positive behavior. And number 4, make it serviceable by the keeper with minimal effort. Note that the reference to the keeper comes last on that list, and that aesthetics are not on it at all. Personally, I've found that following these rules inevitably leads to an aesthetically pleasing enclosure, but as we'll see later, everyone has their own notion of what's nice to look at, and to each their own, as long as the animal's needs are met first. So let's break those rules down in more detail. Whether they're fossorial, terrestrial, or arboreal, snakes are pretty secretive creatures by nature, spending most of their time hiding or trying to blend in with their environment, which is one of the reasons there's such a limited amount of research on them. They're hard to find. Therefore, the more secure they feel in their environment, the more emboldened they'll be to explore beyond their hiding places, and why a design that incorporates an array of hiding spots and visual barriers for security is so crucial. It's tempting to leave empty space in the enclosure because you want to be able to see your animal, but this can actually make you less likely to see them. A branch isn't just for climbing, and plants aren't just for looks. Cluttering up an enclosure with these things provides an increased sense of security. For us, the word clutter usually has negative connotations, with its definition including descriptors like untidy, disordered, and even reduced effectiveness. Mainstream society tends to idealize and elevate minimalism and stark design. For those of us with neurodivergence, clutter is often a byproduct of how our brains operate, and the negative connotations around the word can have painful stigmas. But our snakes are our allies in this. Clutter offers them a sense of safety and functions as enrichment and a means for exercise. So for snake enclosures, it's something to strive for. It may seem counterintuitive, but the more clutter you have in a snake's habitat, the more likely you are to see them. Even though the standard recommendation is to have one hide on the cool side and another on the warm side, if the snake feels exposed and at risk of predation just moving from one to the other, they might be less inclined to move unless absolutely necessary, or when they think they're unobserved. But if you provide visual barriers in between multiple hides instead of two, your snake will feel safer to move more freely. And that heightened sense of security might mean it hides less often overall. This also allows them to feel safe across their entire temperature gradient, not just the warmest and the coolest spots. Another way to increase a sense of security is to add items that match the color of your animal, allowing them concealment by blending into their surrounding environment. Oloran's patterns blend in so well with his substrate and with cork bark that it often takes me a moment to find him even when his body is exposed. In the wild, dumerils are known for blending in with the leaf litter of the forest floor, just waiting for their prey to come by without noticing them. So how's my enclosure measuring up to provide that sense of security for him? Well, I've added visual barriers with real and fake plants and 2 cork hides in addition to his cave hide, but I could improve if I had actual leaf litter instead of just cocoa husk, and I could also add some more overhead cover. Burrowing is natural behavior for his species, but perhaps he'll come out more often if I change things up. Most of the time, if I'm lucky, I just get to see his little head poking out to hunt at night. Please take a moment to consider supporting the channel on Patreon. It takes me days, if not weeks, to research and create these videos, and there's no money in it for me. I do it because I'm passionate about sharing information that might help both people and snakes have more fulfilling lives together. There's no payouts here on YouTube, and the investment I make is significant. So if you find any of it helpful, enjoyable, or you just want to watch without the ads YouTube shoves in your face, head to Patreon and throw a few bucks a month into the pot to help me keep this going. You'll get some exclusive content, some small gifts, and my eternal gratitude. And big shout out to my most recent patron, Ryan Powers, for becoming a Tier 3 member. Thank you so much, Ryan. I love when people get large enclosures for their snakes, but if you don't provide a way for the snake to use all of the space, then it's kind of a waste, right? So let's address rule number 2, maximize usable space. This enclosure was posted on Pinterest with the caption, "Climbing snake." But the only place to climb is in that one corner, and the rest of the space that could be used for climbing is completely empty. Same here. There's some clutter on the ground, but the height is totally wasted. I'm working on this in all of my enclosures by adding to the vertical space as much as I can, so the snake can utilize more than just the floor space. Even if your snake is terrestrial or even fossorial, giving them the option to use more of their space is valuable, not just in offering them more choice, but in supporting healthy behaviors and opportunities for exercise. You might just be surprised to see that your hognose actually enjoys hanging from a branch like a circus acrobat. You can even make use of the ceilings by installing things like sky hides or suspending enrichment items like I've done here in Nymeria's enclosure. She loves this thing, and I need to get her a bigger one because she's almost outgrown it. This is actually a great example of both maximizing space and offering security. It's off the floor and it allows her to hide in the open. She's got the comfort of the enclosed space, but I can still see her. The rest of the space is practically all filled in by the large branch in the center and a cork flat that acts as a cover and a ramp to access the hanging hide. She also has a climbing toy hanging from the top on the warmer end of the enclosure so she can adventure upwards in different temperature gradients. In Galadriel's recent upgrade, I made an effort to use as much of the space as I could with a hammock and branches across the length of the upper half, as well as 3 hides and a plant on the floor. She started out as a very shy snake and didn't come out of her shell until I added a lot of clutter and visual barriers. She's also shown a bit less inclination to climb than her sister Nymeria since day 1, but she definitely will as long as she feels safe. So I added these hanging plants to create some more visual barriers to encourage her to use the vertical space, and it's been working. Just because you haven't seen your snake using the space doesn't mean they're not using it, unless you spend all of your time with your face against the glass watching them to prove otherwise, and you really shouldn't do that. Now, Anu's space is vastly different from the boa's, but then again, so is she. The design uses the space in a way that seems to work well for her though, with large ledges at different heights, small ledges, protrusions from the walls that she can use to climb on or wedge her body into, and branches that allow her to climb vertically or diagonally. She uses every inch of this thing, and it seems well suited to her activity level and bold personality. Not that I think it couldn't be improved at all, but I feel pretty good about this one for now. Then there's Olorin's enclosure, which has a ton of wasted space. There's not that much going on above floor level. Now, he is a heavy-bodied species that normally spends most of his time on the ground, and I haven't observed him showing much of an interest in climbing things he has in his enclosure. And I actually did put a camera in there overnight to check. It was boring. And yet, when I put him in the party pen, I caught him climbing. He's definitely inquisitive when presented with new things, and it could also just be that the branch he has in there is too thin for him to feel safe climbing on now that he's gaining some size. Some snakes are, shall we say, not as graceful or nimble as others, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be given the option to use their muscles and exercise. So I'd say his enclosure needs some work. I'll be building out some wide shelves and ledges with sturdy branches or slate rocks he can use to get up to those safely. And although I wouldn't call him a shy snake, it might benefit him to add more visual barriers at the same time. Both of the first rules support the third. Encourage a wide range of positive behavior. Of course, it's crucial to allow the snake to perform its primary behaviors, the ones it's most adapted to do. So just as a tree boa's enclosure should encourage climbing and perching, a hognose snake should have space that supports digging or burrowing. Here, the layer of substrate is so thin that it doesn't allow the snake to do what it does best. So it's just trying to burrow under its hide. The enclosure does encourage other types of behavior, which is great, but you don't want to leave out its very favorite. Here, the keeper has encouraged the ball python to climb, which is great in principle, but there's nothing else for it to do. Not enough floor space for it to move freely on the ground, and no security. To me, it kind of looks like it's clinging to the branches for dear life. The point of this rule, though, is to allow the animal some choices, to stimulate their senses and cognitive function, and to get them to use their bodies. Snakes in captivity are at much higher risk for obesity for lack of exercise, and at risk of being bored out of their minds in a box without a variety of enrichment. Anu's 10-foot enclosure encourages almost every type of positive behavior I can think of. It has tons of different kinds of hiding, climbing, and basking options, 3 different forms of lighting and heating, and a corner area without any light above it. She is not a shy snake by any means and has never had issues being out in the open, so the plants I do have in there are pretty much just to give her another opportunity to dig, which she does and has killed most of the plants I've given her, so I'm working on getting some more robust options for her. Why do you always break the plants? Huh? What do you have to say for yourself? I can't seem to put plants in here without you killing them. Hopefully you won't kill it before it takes root. BCIs spend more time climbing when they're younger and smaller, but it's always good to give them options. Cerberus has hides on the floor, enough space and substrate to burrow, and some climbing opportunities both with and without heat and UVB. He's a pretty shy and inactive snake both in and out of his enclosure though. He usually picks a spot and sticks with it for months, only occasionally moving when he's preparing to shed. However, I recently added to and changed the layout a little bit, and he switched spots, and I've seen him in different places now. So for snakes that aren't very active, it definitely seems to do them good to move a few things around now and again to motivate more exploration of their environment and to exercise. You don't want to change everything all at once, which could cause stress, but if they're just sitting in one spot all the time, then it's probably time for a bit of an enclosure makeover. Since Sev will be ready for his expansion soon, it'll be a perfect opportunity to try new things that might encourage him to, do more. Helios' species is labeled as semi-arboreal, although he's shown a preference for being off of the ground for the most part. He has 8 square feet of floor space, but also 4 feet of height, including shelves and a multi-level climbing ladder with netting and vines strung across it. It encourages him to use his body for climbing and offers basking opportunities both openly and cryptically. He seems comfortable doing either, probably thanks to all the clutter in front of the ladder. He can also hide off the ground on either of his 2 shelves, one that's directly under the heat and one below it in the middle of the temperature gradient. He uses that one the most, but I've definitely seen him use both. He almost never descends to the ground until the evening, but there he can hide, explore plants, and I've even observed him digging and burrowing. So although I'm very much looking forward to remodeling it soon to include larger, more natural looking shelves and a different set of perches, he uses every inch of the space in a variety of ways. What do you think could be improved? I mean, what's missing from all of my enclosures is a water feature beyond their water bowls. So someday I'd like to change that, especially for the boas. The 4th rule can be challenging in conjunction with the previous ones, that the enclosure be serviceable by the keeper with minimal effort. There are times when I've designed an enclosure in a way that I think checks the first 3 boxes, only to find that getting to the water bowl or sifting through substrate to clean is difficult without removing some, if not all, of the items in the enclosure. I try to find a balance, but sometimes it takes a few tries, as I usually err on the side of the snake's needs. I'm pretty happy with Nymeria's layout, but I have to pull out a lot of things just to turn over the substrate every day, which sometimes means I accidentally disturb her when she's sleeping. But because she seems happy, I'm going to leave it for now. The composition of Helios's enclosure makes it extremely difficult to get to him unless he's in a very particular spot. With all the things in the way, and because he's so strong and agile, unless I've timed it perfectly, there's just no getting to him if he doesn't want to come out. But the animal's needs come first, and since it seems to suit him, and cleaning isn't difficult even when he's in there, I've accepted that he'll just come out less often for the time being, since he rarely chooses to do so on his own. Severus's favorite spot used to be on this shelf in a plastic rectangular hide, which was really difficult to pull out from behind the branch because of its size and shape. When I did some rearranging, I switched the hide to one that fit better, but he hasn't returned to the spot since. Maybe he doesn't like that hide, or maybe he's just happy with his new options. It's kind of hard to know without trying things out and observing his response. If I put the old hide back, I'll need to change the position of the branch to allow me to get back there more easily. Of course, he's just about to outgrow that hide anyway, so might be a moot point. Elora is extremely active and the most agile snake I've ever seen, climbing vertical glass walls and hanging from the ceiling. But she's also still skittish of approach, so I've cluttered her space as much as I could, and then in order to clean, I have to remove almost everything, which is super annoying for both of us. I'm very excited about building her upgrade in the next month or so with all of these factors in mind, so I can give her even more opportunities to use the space while making it easier for me to service it. After all 4 of those golden rules have been considered, then we can think about personal aesthetics. I really do find that I end up liking how things look as a result of at least the first 3 rules, but everyone has their own ideas of what's pleasant to look at. Regardless of what you like, though, decoration should not take precedence over the animal's needs. Of course you want to enjoy looking at your vivarium, but you don't have to live in it. This person went to a lot of trouble to make these backgrounds, but they do nothing to support the animal, and the enrichment isn't for them, but obviously for the keeper. On the top, the animal fills the space and is completely exposed. On the bottom, the hide's not even big enough for the animal to fit in, so it's practically useless. The fake plants are hanging on the back wall instead of creating barriers, which makes them purely for aesthetics. So before you add trinkets to your enclosure or spend time creating a background that you think is cute or fun, make sure you've worked within the boundaries of those golden rules first. The practice of keeping reptiles isn't a one-and-done situation. Being fluid and adapting to their personalities and behavioral responses, investing time and money into developing their environments is all part of an engaging and fun experience that can last decades. There's always room for improvement, reflection, and increasing your snake's quality of life. So as long as you're doing that to the best of your abilities, then you're probably doing it right. I hope you benefited from some of this, and if you did, don't forget to hit that like button before you go. I'm Shira, and this is Anu, and we'll see you again next time for more snake therapy.